Hello and welcome to tutorial number 3 for processing. In this section, we are going to talk a little bit about other type of numeric variables such as float and doubles. Okay, in our case, if we need bigger numbers, we cannot use integer variables. Integer variables are only 4 bytes. Okay, so different from an integer variable that stores 4 bytes, we want to use decimals, or we want to use very big or small numbers, then we want to use a float or a double. In this program, we have a very simple program where we are going to generate a number. Okay, so in this case, I just created the size, screen green, and just for a review, remember that this is RGB, and so red 0, green 255, and blue 0. So in that case, I just get the color green for my background. And I am going to generate a random number. Now a random number will generate a float. Okay, so instead of creating an integer number, I am going to create a random number from 0 to 23. Okay, not inclusive. So this value will never be shown. Okay. So every time that I write random, I am going to create or ask for a random number between 0 and this number not inclusive. Okay, so the float number is going to be a decimal number, so it's very precise, and I'm going to try to get this numbers from 0 to 100 not inclusive with decimals, so it will give you a pretty much random number. We are going to see in a second how to get an integer or how to cast it into an integer so we can grab a whole number. Okay, but now I want to display what is this number. Like, I want to display it on the screen, and every time that I get a random number, I'm gonna show it on the screen. So it's very simple. I'm just gonna write down text size, and this is gonna be my text size, and here, where I create the function text, I'm going to type in rand, which is the variable that I just created. And instead of these coordinates, I'm going to write down the center of my screen. So it's going to be the width divided 2 and the height divided 2. And that way I'm going to display my text right there. I'm going to display that text automatically there. Okay? So I'm going to start displaying this over and over again. Okay? And see what it shows. Now we're going to see that we're going to have a little problem because we're not going to be able to see our numbers. You can see it's just a bunch of numbers drawing one top of the other, so we can't actually see it because we're not creating the background update. Okay, and so after we write down, or after we do all this, we want to update the background, see if we can see it better. Okay, just like we did with our other tutorials. Now we're looking at this because it's going really fast. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, let's see if I can put it bigger. And it's going really fast because remember the frame rates that we were talking about. So in this case, we need to lower down the frame rates to see what random numbers we're getting. So right here on the setup, I'm going to change my frame rate to 1 per second, so it would be 1 frame per second. Okay, and let's see what's going to happen. Now I can see the number changing every second, so I'm getting random numbers between 0 and 99.999. Okay, as you can see, this is the amount of decimal places that my float number can give me. So I'm getting a bunch of random numbers that are going to help me create whatever I need. Okay, so that's how you get a random number. So just so you know, a random number is a float, and a float is a decimal with 3 decimal places. Okay, so that's how we get a decimal number. We also learned how to write down the number on the screen. It's very simple. You just type text size and the number, the size of your text, and text with the variable and the coordinates where you want to display the number. Okay, so this is how you create random numbers using processing. We are going to learn right now that these random numbers are going to help us create some other animations. Okay, so sometimes instead of float numbers or decimal numbers, we need a random integer. In this case, we are going to use something called casting. We can cast a float number into an integer number and store it into an integer number. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change the variable type ran to int. As soon as I write int, the program is telling me, look, there is a type mismatch. You cannot store a float number, which is this function, into an integer number. So in this case, I need to cast it. Casting is kind of like a disguise for the number. So he grabs this float number and he casts it into an integer number. That way I can store it into my new variable, which is an integer number. So when you have problems with the mismatch, you might want to use casting because it has to be the same variable type. In this case, is an integer number. So you want to do casting for this random. And if I display the numbers, they're going to be whole numbers right now. Okay? In this case, we're getting all whole numbers. Right? So all the decimal parts are gone. The thing is, you will never get the 100. If you want to use the number inclusive all the way to 100, you might want to add 1 to all this. Okay? If you add 1, you will probably get the 100, because what it does is that it truncates. It doesn't round. The number is not rounded, it's truncated. Okay? So all the decimal places are gone. Okay? Now, how can I use random numbers? Well, one way that I like on animations is using it for the colors. Let's say that instead of these 3, I use random. Remember that the maximum number is 255. So I use a random number on each one every time I create a background. So every time I'm going to get a different background when I update it. Okay? So every time that I update the background, I'm going to change it. This just shows that I can use random numbers for anything. So I'm going to get a bunch of different colors every time the number changes. So every time there is a change of the number, every second, because I said that the frame rate was every single second, I am going to change the color of my background. Okay, so this animation starts to get more dynamic. Okay, very good. So this is our tutorial number 3, which is very simple. Your task is to create a circle that it's going to become smaller and smaller every time, and the circle is going to change its colors. You can use some skills from previous tutorials, like changing or moving circles or moving ellipses and rectangles. And in this case, you have to make it smaller, kind of like going in or out. Okay, so let me show you how it looks like. Okay, so I'm talking about something like this. Okay, so you're going to have your circles changing color every time they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. You're going to see something very curious, is that it's going to go back up, okay, when it reaches a certain point. Okay, so it gets to the negative numbers, and after the negative numbers, it will turn back to turning big. Okay, so this is the animation of the task that you should develop. Okay, remember that in order to get random colors, you just need to add random to the background, or fill in this case. the fill of your shape. Okay, so this is the animation, kind of goes down, it becomes smaller, and then gets big again. Okay, so good luck with that, and see you next tutorial.